I was just sitting here thinking about something that's been on my mind for a while now. Why do people beg on the street? I mean, I'm sure most of us have seen it. It's like a common thing in modern society. People just sitting on the side of the road, holding out their hand, asking for money. Well, there's an interesting documentary that was made called The Secret Economy of Street Begging. Now, this is not one of those clickbait documentaries. They actually put a lot of time into making this, and they go deep into the topic. This is going to be more of like a summary of what they found rather than my own opinion. I want to present both sides fairly. So what exactly is begging? Well, from the outside looking in, we might think that all beggars are the same, but actually, if you dive into the subject, it's a lot more complicated than we think. Some are drug addicts, some are alcoholics, some are simply poor, some are organized, some are aggressive, and some are lazy. Some beg for food, others beg for money. Some don't even need the money, but simply want it. So why do they beg? Well, to start off, this documentary follows around a few different beggars and goes in depth with them. One of these people was a woman named Lori, who begged for 30 years. She said she had always been poor her entire life. But after watching this documentary, I got the feeling that she was probably an addict or an alcoholic, because she didn't really seem to have a concrete idea of how she would use the money. She also seemed to have some mental problems. So it's hard to say the documentary also follows this man who was a veteran. He said he begged so that he could buy food. Then they went to a place where there were a lot of beggars and saw that most of them were younger guys, mostly around 20 years old. They asked these people why they were begging, and they said things like they needed it for food, transportation, and shelter. Some of them said they had no education, and some of them said they were working for this guy, and that's why they were begging every day. There was this one beggar who gave an excellent example as to why some people beg. He said, "You know, some people feel sorry for me, and they give me money because they think I'm desperate, and I'm not." And then they ask him, "Well, why do you beg?" And he says, "Because I can make more money begging than doing any other job." That's when I realized this documentary was taking a turn, because he was talking about needing money for food or shelter. He was talking about wanting it, wanted to get more money begging than having a job. That tells us something very important. Some people prefer begging to working, and the reason for this is simple. With a job, you have to work hours for a set amount of money. But begging, you can get money for doing nothing. If you sit on the side of the road and hold out your hand long enough, eventually someone will give you something. And that's the main appeal to begging. You don't have to do anything. All you have to do is sit there. Now, the problem with this is that begging becomes a sort of trap. People will continue to beg because it's easier than working. And when people realize that they can make more money begging than working, that's when society has a big problem. And that's when I learned something else very important. A lot of these beggars have choices. Like there was one woman who begged on the side of the road, but she was also working at McDonald's. She had a job, but she still chose to beg. Then they went to another place where there were a ton of beggars, and they talked to a woman who ran a shelter there. And she said, "You know, a lot of these people choose to be on the streets. They don't want to come stay here. They like the freedom of being on the streets." Okay, so at this point, I think it's safe to say that some people prefer begging to working, and some people prefer begging to living in a shelter. But there's a much bigger problem here. A lot of these beggars, they don't want help. They don't want a job. They don't want money. They don't want food. They just want things their way. Prefer begging to having help. So why do people prefer begging to having help? Well, the answer to this question is simple. It's because they're addicted to the feeling of getting something for nothing. The moment you give a beggar money, you're feeding their addiction. When they get money, it validates their behavior. It makes them feel good about themselves. It makes them feel like they did something great by just sitting there. And because of this, they become addicted to it. But there's a big problem with this. If they keep getting money, then they won't be motivated to change. And that's why it's hard to help these people. It's like you can offer them a helping hand, but the second you do, they let go. So at this point, you might be wondering if some of these beggars have a choice. Why don't they just go get a job? And the answer to that is simple. It's because they're addicted to drugs or alcohol. Once you're addicted to something, you lose all motivation in life. You lose all ambition. All you care about is the next hit. And this is where things get difficult, because people do unbeg to get money, to buy necessities like food and shelter. They beg to get money to buy drugs and alcohol. So now the question is, How do you stop someone who's addicted to something? Well, the answer to that is simple. You can't. The only thing you can do is try to convince them to go to rehab. But at the end of the day, they're the ones who have to want to change. This is where I think a lot of us have the wrong idea. We think that giving money to a beggar is helping them, but that's not true. Giving money to a beggar is only helping their addiction. It's only making it easier for them to get more drugs and alcohol. So if you really want to help a beggar, then don't give them money. Instead, try to convince them to go to rehab. Try to help them get off the streets and into a home. Give them food and clothing, but don't give them money. And this is where the problem starts to get really big. People who beg to feed their addiction, they're not the ones we should be worrying about. They're the ones who need help. These are the people we should be trying to save. But when we give them money, we're only hurting them more. The real problem is people who beg but don't need anything. These are the people who beg for selfish reasons. These are the people who beg simply because they don't want to work. Or these are the people who beg because they're lazy. Or the people we shouldn't be giving money to. But because we do, we're encouraging their behavior. We're encouraging their laziness. And this is where society needs to make a change. If we keep giving money to people who don't need it, then we're only encouraging their laziness. We're only discouraging them from finding a job. So what's the solution here? I don't really have an answer to that. I mean, everyone has their own opinion on what should be done. But I think we can all agree that giving money to a beggar doesn't solve the problem. It only makes things worse. As always, thanks for watching. Comment below, what do you think is the best solution to this problem? And if you've ever given money to a beggar, did you ever wonder where that money went?